Make Moriches great again.
Make sure you.
All right, will do.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for all coming out on a Sunday morning. I'm sure many of you are looking forward to getting on your boats and enjoying your Sunday, but you're out here because this is an important issue. In order for you to be able to enjoy your boats, you're here to talk about this issue this morning. So I don't live that far from here. I grew up in Shirley. I live about half a mile from where I grew up. So going boating, growing up, this was the inlet that would take us out into the ocean. And these are issues that we faced way back when that you're still facing now. There's a few different things, as you know, for us to talk about. One has to do with the dredging of the inlet itself. Not just when the next time it's dredged, but how is it going to be consistently maintained after that. Secondly is knowing this group, knowing this man right here, Mike. There's been plenty of conversation about a long-term solution about having a jetty or something that would keep the inlet a little bit more secure long-term. Then thirdly is inside of the inlet itself is the dredging of the channels. So we have a lot to talk about. And you probably have some other stuff on your mind. So what I'll do is I'll just share a little bit about what I know, maybe somewhat of an update, and then you guys can ask questions. We'll go from there. So the drafted GRR, the General Reevaluation Report, everyone's heard of FIMP, Fire Island to Montauk Point Plan. The draft General Reevaluation Report was released about just under a month ago. What we're in right now is a public comment period that goes until the end of September. There's going to be at least 4 public hearings for the draft GRR. Once the public comment period is over, then over the course of the end of September to December, they're going to finalize the GRR. So you'll have a final GRR hopefully sometime in December. Might get moved in January, but hopefully it's done by the end of 2016. There's a bill called WRDA. It's a must-pass bill. Waters of the U.S. There's some other issues involved here more than just a bill. There's some regulation and whatnot, but there's a bill called WRDA, which is a must-pass bill. And what happens is once you have a final GRR, you include the GRR to WRDA. So that's when Congress passes the GRR. So the FIMP plan was originally just over $600 million. It's now $1.16 billion. It's grown since I've been in office by $500 million, which is great. There's a whole lot of other projects all throughout the Fire Island to Montauk Point region, but specifically as it relates to this inlet, there would be an initial dredge when the GRR actually starts to be implemented, and then it would be maintained every 2 years. And why that was important is, well, as you know, is that Moriches Inlet, for multiple reasons, is in need of a dredge more frequently than what you'll find in other inlets. So, where they have experienced through the years, Shinnecock can make it many years between dredges. Moriches sometimes as little as 1 year, but every 1 to 2 years, Moriches is in need of a maintenance dredge. So the good news is, with regards to GRR, weighing in on a public comment period is for everyone to weigh in support of the idea that's currently in there. Just weigh in to keep it there is a 2-year maintenance dredge of Moriches Inlet. So that's good news. As far as what you want to see added to the GRR, I would encourage all of you to weigh in favor of investing money in a long-term stabilization, something along the lines of a jetty, and additionally weighing in favor of having some type of dredging on the bayside. The drafted GRR is just a draft. It is a proposed final, so it depends on how you want to look at it, but it's not actually final yet. So the Army Corps of Engineers is encouraging everyone all across the entire region of Fire Island to Montauk Point Plan to weigh in favor of what they like, that they see in there, and also weigh in favor of what they want to see added. in his proposal. And all of those 4 public hearings that I mentioned, I believe all 4 of them are going to be in September.
And the hearing's going to be where?
I think the closest one here is in Patchogue, Bill. The closest hearing.
Right now, Patrick Ferry and probably Southampton College.
And you're going to notify us all.
Oh yeah,
how?
we can provide a list. 2 of them were scheduled, right?
4.
4, no, but 2 were actually. Did they announce the other 2 yet?
Montauk Firehouse,
Right.
and the other one, no, they have not announced yet. 4.
Okay, so they've announced 2 of them. One of them's in Patchogue.
Patchogue Ferry Terminal Fins.
So what we'll do is we'll just get you the list of all 4. I believe that we're just about to get the details of the other 2.
And you have any dates?
Hopefully next week.
As soon as we have the dates, we'll get them to you right away. Date, time, location. Also, we'll find out, as far as the process goes, make sure you're as efficient as possible with your time. You can also weigh in writing too.
When you talk about dredging the inlet, are we just talking about the channel from the inlet out to the ocean, or the bay channels? Like, we have a constant problem between
It's just
buoy
inlet.
17 and buoy 30.
As of
here.
right now, the draft GRR is just inlet. So what you would be weighing in favor of is to keep the plan for the inlet, but to, at the same time, you'd also want to advocate in favor of adding dredging on the bay side.
What we'd like to see really is dredging is maintenance. It has to go on all the time. The channels fill in, the shoal over. So, I mean, if we had, I know AMI would give input from our members what areas where their marinas are or their boaters are. Like, this is constantly a problem from 17 to 30. You can speak to Seatow with Towboat US, they'll tell you the boats is pulled off the sandbars all the time. That's one channel that is constantly, shoaling in because of the currents.
Well, it was actually what was the original plan was that they weren't even going to be taking they weren't going to be dredging from the inlets for their beach project. So what we have seen through the years, that's actually one of the things that's been frustrating to you guys in the past, was that every time you'd see one of these huge projects where you're adding sand to the beach, they would be pulling from the ocean, and you're like, well, why don't you just take it from our inlet, because we need to be dredged out of our inlet. So I came in, I was in the state center for 4 years, and I was just mentioning this to a couple of you guys before we got started. When I was in the state senate reaching out to the Army Corps of Engineers, it was almost like I was just some other, I was just like contacting them as if I was just a regular resident. But it's different being in Congress because, so I serve on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. We have jurisdiction over the Army Corps of Engineers. So the relationship since January 2015, as I went to them on this particular issue, is different as far as the responsiveness than before. Now, when we go to them, I mean, they answer emails, they answer phone calls, we have meetings all the time. There's a very good open line of communication in the Army Corps. So we came in last year into Congress and we basically relayed what we were relaying in the past and what you guys have been relaying for years, and saying it just doesn't make sense. If you guys are going to add sand to the dunes, take it from the inlet. So it's the same thing for Shinnecock Inlet, and like they're going to be taking from the inlets to take care of this on the beach. Now, as far as the channel goes, on the bay side, not the inlet, it's not included. It's also less. It's considered to be less cost effective. And, it doesn't matter. Like keep asking for that to be included. Like the Army Corps. This is a point in time where the Army Corps of Engineers is listening to the public like never before. Like where you have 4 public hearings and to talk about this, whatever you like, whatever you want to see added.
I just want to clarify something. At a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers that Congressman Zeldin set up, and we had me, Les, Seatow, Billy Jane, I was there. We faced our concerns about from Smith Point all the way down to Shinnecock with the channel in the bay. And they basically told us, not really, go fly a kite, and kind of like, you don't have enough commercial traffic here. They consider tankers. They don't consider us commercial fishermen like me and him. They, consider regular people that have boats. That was kind of their comment to the whole thing. We brought it up to them, and they kind of like shut it down.
Yeah,
so it wasn't, it was brought up. It wasn't
on the
top priority to them.
As far as the channel on the bay side,
Comment in there now, do it. Do
And
it, get in
the
there.
other- the other
say
side of the
something,
coin was,
because
we-
that's the only way you're gonna get it done.
Yeah,
And the open hearings.
just adding.
Right now, this comment period that they have, is
Right.
the 30th.
And the board members.
Right, that's what I'm saying, you email them now, do it.
I would totally echo that point. And anything you could do to highlight the economics of this is very important.
What is the cost to
Economically,
dredge the
commercial
inlet?
and
I understand this is
recreational
gonna be
is
done
phenomenal.
every year, every other year. Do you have any idea what the cost of dredging is gonna be?
I could get that. I have that. I just don't have that.
Ballpark figure. My point is, would that money be best spent in stabilizing the inlet? Football jetties, whatever the case might be, because like Ed says, Army Corps of Engineers doing nothing for us because we have no comments whatsoever. The reason we don't have any comments is because nobody wants to go in and out of that inlet. Until that's stabilized, that's not gonna happen. So, you know, are we spitting in the wind just doing this as
Well, I
opposed to?
tell you right now, what we're doing is seeing years go by, like many years go by, where for year after year after year, it's in need of a dredge and it's not getting dredged. So this is a huge upgrade to have a scheduled 2-year maintenance dredge at Moriches. But what I'm suggesting you say on top of that is by the way, weigh in favor of having that scheduled, but add to it your point that it would make sense to have a jetty or some other type of infrastructure upgrade that would provide more stability.
Hi, I'm Jay Scott. I just recently purchased a Lily fishing station. I may have missed this coming in the beginning, but whose jurisdiction does this fall under, state or county?
Federal.
Federal.
It's federal. All right.
And by the way, as you get closer to like where we're standing right now, you start crossing into other jurisdictions.
That's why I was asking, because I'm going through this right now because I'm in charge of the Noya Creek dredging project, which is a huge project, and it goes from the Army Corps of Engineers to DEC to just recently we found out that Fish, Game, and Wildlife is now involved in it, and right down to the town. And a lot of it has to do with how much of the bottom is touched and how much is carried away. But beside that point, so your recommendation is a 2-year maintenance program?
No, this is in the draft GRR.
Okay, and
So I am.
do we get a copy of that somehow? Or-
Sure, yeah.
I'd love to get a copy of that and read through it.
What's this?
That's the information on the, where to get the information on the Army Corps plan and how to plan.
Okay.
And we legally get one of those.
Okay.
And
Oh, you have
so
copies
is
for
it-
I
everybody?
got 50 copies.
So I guess my big question is,
We have a URL, a
Yeah.
website that you can get a copy. So
Alright.
everyone's gonna get a copy of this.
today?
It's kind of long, so
Yeah. It's all right. I've been reading hundreds of papers on this, so
yeah.
I'm happy
So
to-
we have a copy for everybody.
Okay, great. And so I guess when I go back to the jurisdiction aspect of this, so I know we've spoken a lot about the Army Corps of Engineers, but does the DEC have to get involved? Is Fish, Game, and Wildlife involved in this? Like, do we have to go through those parties as well,
Yeah.
or are they allowing?
This is a federal project. By the way,
Right.
100% federally funded too. So as far as the power of the purse goes, when you start requiring other levels of government to come up with money, then they might start weighing in with a little bit more force and effect. This is something where Fish and Wildlife certainly, whether it is on land, on the barrier beaches, in the inlet, they have the ear of the Army Corps of Engineers. So they have a seat at the table in this process.
Because from what I've experienced, it's the other way around. The Army Corps of Engineers, from what I've experienced in dredging, rolls over and basically lets you do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And it's the DEC that really weighs in the most.
The experience on land has been much more influential. They have been much more influential than the experience in the inlet. For example, there was an emergency stabilization project where the Pattersquash Overwatch was just southwest of here. When that was done, the Army Corps of Engineers wanted to do this emergency stabilization project and fill in that overwash, but because of the piping plover, Fish and Wildlife they directly had a seat at the table where now when you go out Moriches Inlet, you'll see an area where there used to be a whole lot of dunes, and the dunes are gone. And a whole lot of people who have traveled the inlet, like, what happened to all those dunes? That was part of an agreement to get the approvals to do the Powder Squash Overwash Stabilization Project there at Smith Point. Part of that agreement, sitting down at the table with Fish and Wildlife, was to create a natural habitat to just east of the inlet. I'm sorry, just west of the inlet. So what we have experienced is that Fish and Wildlife has they have a role with both, but much more of an influence as it relates to land, especially where it's land. These dredging projects, especially where there is endangered, protected wildlife.
Yeah, because the DEC, and from our perspective, what I've run into so far is it has nothing to do really with the land or where it's being dredged. It all had to do with how it affects the waters beyond that. Because the DEC has jurisdiction over this entire bay, and so their viewpoint on it was, how does that much fresh water affect the bay that's been living the way it has, with the continued amount of water that's been coming in regularly the way the inlet is right now? And that's what we ran into. And that was the biggest stumbling block, was the DEC, and that held us up almost 2 years. So I guess my question is, like, is there any kind of timetable that they're thinking for dredging or anything?
Yeah, so once you have a final GRR, let's say it's done by December, and then it's added to WRDA, so it's passed and signed into law by the president. 2017 is spent preparing all of these different projects. Again, it says $1.16 billion worth of all sorts of different types of projects. We'll see 2017 getting spent preparing everything. What we would like to do, by the way, one of the lessons that I learned before I even took office was to be very careful as far as saying timelines, because I've watched others say timelines, and then it gives the public hope on a particular timeline, and then the timeline moves, and that elected official kind of seems full of it because they gave 7 different timelines and none of it was accurate. So I'm telling you, the timeline as it currently exists is that, the public comment period ends the end of September. The plan is to have a final GR by December. That as soon as WRDA can come, by the WRDA is a big bill, it's not just for this. I mean, this is a small piece of WRDA. WRDA gets passed, signed by the president, and then with that timeline, 2017 is used to prepare all these different projects, so that hopefully in that 2018 to 2020 timeframe, you're seeing. By the way, this is not something that takes as long as some of the other projects, but some of the projects are going to end up actually taking, like the project itself is going to take a long time. This is something, once you have the dredge, it doesn't take that long. So that's a timeline as it currently exists. I would bet that we see 2017 get used possibly entirely in preparing everything. You got a question?
I was just going to say, I think you're implying that different agencies take the lead in different elements of this process.
Yeah.
To answer his question.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you're bringing that point up, because actually, as I was calling you, I was just thinking, like, one alibi is that so the first congressional district, we have a lot of different kinds of projects, and who is in the lead of these different projects vary from project to project. The Fire Island to Montauk Point plan, the FIM plan, has the Army Corps in the lead. When you go a little bit further west of here and you're in Davis Park and you're dealing with eminent domain issues with people who own houses, a lot of that, the real estate issues, are handled at the county level. So I could give you examples where I've seen a different agency or a different level of government more in the lead. But as far as this project goes, Army Corps is very, very, very much in the lead.
And so, in conclusion, you're asking all of us to contact the Army Corps in terms of writing or emailing or whatever.
Yeah, I would do it between now and the end of September as part of the public comment period of weighing in. I would strongly encourage everyone to weigh in favor of this 2-year stabilization plan for Moriches Inlet. I happen to be makes more sense if you're doing the project on land to take it from the inlet as opposed to from the ocean. But on top of weighing it in favor of what you support, also weighing it in favor of, as Mike asked about, some type of a longer-term stabilization for Moriches Inlet, and also advocate in favor of more dredging on the bay side.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the dredging on the bay side goes, and what they've been doing the last few years is coming down and cutting a 100-foot wide trench through all that sugar sand like that, and it fills in right behind the dredge. And as fast as they move ahead, it's filled right back in again, which is what they've been doing for probably the last 10 years or so, right? I mean, it doesn't even last the season. The other side of it is everything is getting so choked up now that the bays away from the mouth of the inlet are not getting the water exchange anymore. You've got the same water sitting there all the time now, and the water quality is going down the tubes. You know, we should get some flow back through this stuff by getting stuff dredged back the way it was done back years ago there. And it would be very beneficial, I believe, to the environment and all these creeks and everything else.
I've taken enough trips either watching my father run on ground or watching friends, families out here going back to grade school. I just think it's really important that like your comment is shared as part of the public comment period to the Army Corps, and it all adds up. And you might listen. You all are busy. You're working, especially you're a commercial fisherman. And, last night I was in Montauk, meeting with a whole bunch of the fishermen out there. It's 7 days a week. And you know, for them, literally, that was the only time for them to meet was at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. So I went out there for an 8 o'clock Saturday night meeting. But despite how busy you are, your feedback as far as what you've experienced in the inlet, which they understand the inlet piece of it. We've spoken to them about it. That's actually why it's scheduled to the Moriches Inlet specifically is scheduled to a 2-year maintenance dredge. But on top of that, I would encourage you to come and to speak more about the impacts in those 2 other points that I mentioned. Well, I'm sorry, the impacts as it relates to the channel maintenance, and then also the idea of a longer-term stabilization of the inlet.
What's the best route for some emergency dredging situations? For example, like Les mentioned at the last meeting that, you know, you get between like buoy 24, 26 over here. I mean, people are getting injured. They're running around so hard, and it's not even be able to be passed in a few months, right? You would just say 4 or 5 months. It doesn't even feel like you can get a 30-foot boat through there.
So this was actually, this has been the first time I've dealt with this from this standpoint. And what we've experienced with a few different locations is that we gave specific locations to the Coast Guard, and they would go out to look at where a channel, where the buoys were, where the channels were, and they would see if there is a way to move the buoys to see if there's still a navigable channel. And in some areas, it requires an emergency dredge. And in other areas, it didn't require an emergency dredge. So what happens is when we go to the Army Corps, we say that that you need an emergency dredge for this location. You can't get a boat through the channel. Is that someone they will send people out there, not they. Coast Guard will go out there to see if the buoys have to get moved and they can still have a channel. And in some cases, the answer is no. In other cases, it's yes. But that's the process. The first thing that they would do is they would send people out there to see if the buoys have to get moved. But to answer your question as far as how do you get an emergency dredge is after that process, they determine that there isn't a navigable channel.
So you notify Army Corps?
What's that?
You would notify Army Corps about that?
We're in touch with Army Corps on that.
Notify
Yeah, but
your
this is county
You
and
can contact our office because we're also in contact with the Coast Guard.
What does it mean as the low?
The load, I would have to get an answer to that.
I mean, if the channels out here become unnavigable, that usually falls under like county and town jurisdiction, and they're responsible for it. And that's how it is over in Noya.
I don't know where the location is, yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're inside here, like Vinny was saying, like all that falls under town. And
Yeah,
county.
the closer that we get to where we're standing right now, we start crossing into other jurisdictions.
Right.
But there is an area as you're getting further away from here, and it depends on where you are around the 1st Congressional District, where you start crossing into areas that are under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps to do something 100% federally funded. But yes, as you get closer to land, to your point, you start crossing into other jurisdictions, and it's not an Army Corps project, it becomes a state or a county project.
How do you find that?
For you, we can get you an answer on that. If there's a specific location and you want to know who's in charge of that particular jurisdiction, if you want to contact us, we can find out. I have an office in Patchogue. If you guys know where I live too, but I would encourage you to contact my office. It's 31 Oak Street and Suite 20. There's an office in, we have an office in Riverhead as well on Main Street. And I also do mobile office hours. Like for example, this week I had spent the day on Friday. 2 days ago, I spent the day in Mount Sinai. A few hours, I met with every single person who came in who said, I want to have a meeting with you. I met with every single person one-on-one. So I do that as well. Anything else?
Like I said, we already brought that up with channel from Smith Point Bridge all the way down to Pope Bridge in Shinnecock already, and the Army Corps just kind of like blew it off.
Yeah, they did.
That was at the meeting we had, so
Yeah, I mean, it's
they,
not just.
they knew about it. They don't want to address it.
It wasn't
or it's not an issue at the moment.
We've had meetings. I've brought that up too.
So,
They are definitely much more amicable as it relates to the inlet. They are not. I mean, I'll be generous in saying that they are not there yet as far as the bay side of the channel.
Well, I mean,
But to the point, as far as the emergency dredging goes, they've been more responsive on some individual projects where you have been able to navigate. You send the Coast Guard out there, and they verify it. But as far as like a maintenance like not emergency, just like maintenance dredging of the channel, the feedback has not been. It hasn't been good. So the best thing you could do is everyone weighing in favor of it. That helps all of our causes of advocating for this if everyone is weighing in favor of the channel maintenance. Yep. Yeah, and also this week we'll get you a list of the 4 times, locations, dates.
Agreed, which is a good reason for everybody to.
the Intracoastal is still a federal responsibility, right? So it would be the Army Corps' responsibility, keeping it open and navigable and stuff.
I don't know if what kind of exceptions may exist, but as far as this area, but we've operated under the assumption, and we haven't really had too much pushback from the Army Corps when reaching out to them on a particular request. But there certainly, as I mentioned, it's best to pick if there's a location in question, just to reach out to us and we can let you know if for whatever reason there's another level of government.
Well, I mean, the issue is, I have a tendency of being a little bit blunt, but it's been so badly neglected for the last 30 years or better, ever since the county got rid of their dredge. I mean, it's a monumental project now to get it opened up. I mean, you're talking the whole South Shore of Long Island, not just Moriches here. I mean, Shinnecock's in bad shape. The Clove Canal is filling in 3 or 4 different spots, hitting bottom in there. I mean, it's the entire area. It's not just, this here or that over there. It's, I mean, it's the intercoastal waterway. I mean, it seems to me it should be maintained as such. I mean, the dredging jobs they've done the last few years have been a joke.
You go to Florida, you see the dredges out there constantly just moving every day, just moving.
Things
back and
happen
forth,
quick in Florida.
But I think one of the other pushbacks we got, and I don't know if we can talk about this for a moment, is it seems the other issue is the spoilage sites.
Yeah, the other guy in the ocean.
That seems to be the biggest pushback. Where does all the spoilage go? Because there's a lot of sand in the coves and the inlets that may not be good enough to replenish the beaches, and it's a very expensive task to get rid of those spoils. So, is there any way in helping identify some areas locally that would accept the spoiled sand? And, there's a lot of some of the old duck farms.
Well, no, it won't be that way. It's just gonna be income,
That
which
seems to
will
be
probably
a
be
very
about
big issue.
Yeah.
Regardless, even if you get the approval of dredging, what do you do with the spoils?
12, 1 o'clock.
This has been a massive issue in the Long Island Sound. Some of there are, I mean, technology has improved so much with these spoils that whether it's testing, using for
Well, I'll get somebody
recycling,
there with
placing
this
back
who's
on
safe to do
land,
so, sir.
capping landfill, they have found a lot of new creative ways to use the spoils. What they have found is the alternatives to open water dumping cost more money. So that has been the main argument that has been given, ironically, from the EPA. Their argument in favor of open water dumping is because it costs more money for the other stuff. It's kind of like counter to like what the EPA's mission should be. There are some areas, I will say, of the FIM plan where you will have a local community advocating for advanced fill in front of their beach to help maintain the beach and maintain the dunes. So if you go, if you go further out east, like Dune Road, you have some areas, some hamlets, part of Dune Road where they are actually going to be, as part of the public comment period, be advocating for advanced fill in front of their beach. So there are places to place it, but what's very important is that at the same time we're not being counterproductive in the way we handle these spoils. In Long Island Sound, you have all this money getting invested into increasing the water quality of sound, and at the same exact time, you're dumping these dredge spoils in the middle of the sound because they're saying that it is Connecticut. Yes, right. It's Connecticut dredge spoils. They're dumping the sound. Is there a question? Yes.
Yeah, my question is, you mentioned something about a jetty, some preventative measure, so that way you don't have to dredge every 2 years or whatever it is. Has anybody actually looked at the entire ecosystem as a whole to say maybe, putting a jetty out there and widening the east and west cuts would allow the bay to get better fill? Maybe you wouldn't have to dredge the whole bay.
That's what we've been
because
talking
water would
about.
be moving. I mean, just from a holistic standpoint, instead of just putting money into dredging it.
Yeah, I mean the Army Corps is aware of this idea, and it seems to be I don't want to say it's a funding issue where they say they don't have the money to do it. It's like a cost-benefit analysis where like you think of the Army Corps projects going on all across the country, where I mean they're dealing with. We're talking about the Florida Intercoastal, but you have massive ports all around the country where I mean deep water dredging. They look at our inlet, and they know that you have a lot of recreational users, some commercial, using that inlet. And they aren't looking at this inlet here in the same way that they're looking at ports all across, major cities all across the country. So I would say, I mean, if they were standing here, they might say it's a funding issue, but to be more specific, I think it's their cost-benefit analysis that they do, which is, I mean, as precedent all across the country. It's just not. It's not something that meets their cost-benefit analysis that they do everywhere else. However, you're definitely aware that there has never been a better time. There's never been a better window to weigh in favor of a jetty than between now and September 30th. So we're meeting at the perfect time as far as that. They are aware of it. I would place it as a little bit more likely than the channel maintenance ask of the GRR.
Where exactly would this jetty go? Would just be extending out from?
We wanted to extend it on the east side because that's usually the way the water flows from east to west.
So how far out from the?
We wanted it a half to 3/4 of a mile out.
I would be willing to bet if you took that sand that's out in front of them jetties right now out of there, like it wasn't when jetties was put in there, they'd be just fine the way they are.
Probably, yeah.
But you've got acres and acres of sand out in front there. That's
That's just it. So we wanted the east side extended, and they kind of like, again.
Eddie, remember the first meeting we had,
Right.
they didn't want to talk the inlet at all.
Right, no, I know they did.
Today they put the inlet into the fence, so
Right.
they made an impact and make an impact for long.
But that's something that we talked about at that meeting too, something we talked about.
Yeah, I don't specific design that has been like with concrete, like everyone's locked into. I mean, there's ideas, that exist, but if you all met as a group at some other time and you shared feedback with each other and modified your, if you felt the need to, if you modified your ask, I think that's fine.
But once again, I don't think any of us have any idea of ultimately.
You don't
or
have
how
to
it
design.
should-
You don't even have to design it yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
Just so you know, that's not your job.
wasn't it a jetty that ultimately caused all the damage in the dunes that, that the,
You,
what's the,
in the just to clarify, I am not suggesting that you all have to design and engineering. You can weigh in favor of a very general concept, or you can go to a meeting and get into specifics. I'm advocating in favor of, if you want to make the ask for a longer term stabilization, you can go there with as much specificity and generality as you want, but if that is your ask, I would say between now and September 30th to make the ask.
yeah, well, we should be clear on what we're asking for, right? I mean, we're not gonna ask for a jetty
It
that
helps,
hurts us.
the less you guys contradict each other, the more it helps.
Well, I think we need to go.
You to say, well, what should we ask for?
The thing with the jetty on the east side also, the north east, when done well, a lot of sand comes in here at that point. All right, that's enough for getting the
Right.
on the east side instead of the west side.
It's a great question and point, and if it would be helpful, if everyone wanted to give it a few days thought, we can do the same thing on our end, kind of collect the notices, different ideas were shared, and circle back with each other at some point, maybe by the middle of the week, compare notes, and see if you all wanted to get everyone more on the same page as far as exactly what
I think that's a good idea. I think we should be on the same page on what we ask for, because otherwise we look like a bunch of silly
Yeah, I
little.
mean, well, yeah. Thanks. Hey, I didn't name the place, I just kept it going. Yeah, but I mean, to your point, I think the bottom line is, I think you have to request what you want the end result to be. I mean, because we can design the hell out of jetties or however we want, and we could actually shoot ourselves in the foot if it doesn't work out right. So I think the end result is say, you want a deep water inlet that's going to last.
Right.
And then leave it up to the people who deal with this on a daily basis to design what's going to work and propose that back to us. And show us how it's going to work in different seasons. I mean, we just ran into that too. We thought we had the right solution, and the Army Corps of Engineers came back and said, we do this, it's going to wash away, and you're going to be back to square one. So, and they showed models of how the water moves at every season of the year, and they have a wealth of knowledge about how sand moves in the water, and it comes from places you never even expect.
Could we set up a meeting with people from the Army Corps that have the engineering expertise and tell them what the problem is and ask them to give us what they propose as a solution?
Yes,
I
we
agree.
can.
That's what I think.
We expect the Army Corps back out here in a couple of weeks, we can ask the keys for a couple of things. I could probably that day ask them to do one more meeting schedule.
I think even more
We'd love for
important
you to
than
be
just
the
a meeting with
Army
Fish and
Corps.
Wildlife.
Yeah, there's I am constantly meeting with Army Corps and their leadership. I will tell you that there are a whole lot of other meetings, emails, phone calls. I mean, it's like daily.
Daily.
I mean, like the entire Army Corps. Like, I mean, the first congressional district of New York likely has the most amount of projects of any congressional district in the country right now. And so for our congressional district and all those projects, and Bill running point, and me serving on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, the stars are well aligned for an open line of communication. So there are a whole lot of other meetings that take place that I'm not at. But I tell you, we do a lot of stuff in the Army Corps.
I'm the director of constituent services. My boss is Mark Woolley, he's director, district director. Our boss is Lieutenant Eric Amadon, he's the chief of staff. Three. Top boss.
I have 725,000.
But all of us constantly, the three of us are constantly involved in Army Corps. I'm the lead, but Mark's always weighing in and Eric's always there. So it's one of the, an Army Corps is one of the places Lee's team is supposed to focus on all the time. And we have a great relationship with the Coast Guard. I spent a little time with them a couple weeks ago. The Coast Guard's also got a great relationship with us.
Coast Guard's always been in favor of all this kind of stuff there because they know the score. It's just trying to convince the other guys to.
Oh, my question was just if we could have the Army Corps help design it.
Thank you. What's that?
My question, you answered my question, whether the Army Corps could help us with proposals to fix the problem.
I guess like my last question is, I mean, it seems like communication is going to be key in all of this, and I know we're all business, most of us are business owners here, but I think the residential homeowners also, I would think, would want to know about this and weigh in on it too, and I'm sure the weigh-in is going to be very positive, but how do you communicate that to everyone?
We had a meeting with Aqua last week, myself, Eric, and his brother Alex from Larry's Lighthouse. And what they're pointing out is that we really need some more economic data, which we have plenty of. So the impact, from what the business is. It's more the business economics than residents is what he was saying. That we need to really hammer home with. So, maybe we could definitely get that information over to them. It helps.
And we've sent out some information. We've sent letters out. It's it's something where we'll keep on spreading the word from our end. It would be helpful if the local weeklies, Newsday, News 12, especially once you have all four of the public hearings announced, for them to promote it as well. Because I completely agree that more people weighing in certainly helps, especially when you're talking about a very specific ask for your area. Because if the Army Corps is hearing from everyone in one location and they're hearing from no one, or almost no one in another location, it doesn't help that area where the Army Corps is heard from almost no one. But yeah, we'll keep spreading the word. I would suggest the most efficient way possible for your group and your contacts: email, social media. Once we pass along the list of the 4 public hearings and the link that we're going to give you all on your way out. Also,
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was like one place where you could send people and they could learn about this and figure out a way to support it, whether it's writing another letter or at least like signing something in support of it. I think that'd be hugely helpful.
Yeah, we have a printout for all you guys. I'll give you my card. All right. Well, go enjoy your Sunday. I'm jealous. I won't be on the water.
I'd like to thank Harvey Desson, who's the owner of Windswept Marina, for his lovely breakfast.
Thank you very much.
Often opening up his place here for very good public service community events. So I've been here multiple occasions. All right, thanks everybody.